The desert was already cooling when Daniel Hart realized he was lost. The sun had slipped behind the red mesas, leaving long shadows across the scrubland, and his horse, spooked earlier by distant war cries, had bolted hours ago. Daniel had walked until his boots were filled with sand and his throat burned with thirst. Every step felt heavier than the last. That was when he saw the smoke, then blue, rising from a shallow canyon. He followed it cautiously, hand near the worn revolver at his belt. Though he knew a single man wandering, Apache land had little chance if discovered by a war party. Still, thirst was stronger than fear. At the bottom of the canyon stood a small encampment. No warriors, no fires of a large tribe. Just one lodge near a stream, its water glinting faintly in the dying light. And beside the stream, someone stood, a woman. She was washing, her back turned to him, long black hair falling loose down her spine. She was clearly Apache, tall and strong, her movements calm and unhurried. Daniel froze the instant he realized what he'd walked into. He turned away immediately. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely, staring at the canyon wall. "I didn't mean to. I'm lost. I'll leave." But it was too late. A sharp intake of breath cut through the air. Footsteps splashed in the stream. "You looked," she said. Her English was accented but clear. Daniel swallowed. "Only for a second, I swear. I didn't know anyone was here." Silence stretched between them, thick and dangerous. "Turn around," she said. Slowly, carefully he did. She was dressed now in a simple buckskin garment, her dark eyes blazing, not with embarrassment but fear. "You have seen me without clothing," she said. "By our law, that binds us." Daniel frowned. "Binds us how?" Her jaw tightened. "As man and wife." The words hit him harder than any bullet. No, I didn't touch you. I didn't mean any disrespect. I can pay or leave or—" "If you leave," she interrupted, "and my people learn what happened, they will punish us both." A chill crept down his spine. "Punish how?" "They will kill you," she said simply. "And they will shame me. Or worse." Daniel stared at her, the reality settling in. She wasn't threatening him. She was terrified. "My name is Naya," she continued. "I am not a child. I'm a woman of marrying age. And you have seen what no man may see unless he is my husband." The canyon felt suddenly very small. "I don't want to trap you," she said, her voice lowering. "But I will not die for your mistake." Daniel exhaled slowly. He'd crossed borders before, geographical ones, moral ones, but never something like this. Back home, marriage was a choice. Here it was survival. "What if your people never find out?" he asked. "They will," she replied. "They always do." Night settled fully then, stars piercing the sky. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. Daniel looked at the woman before him, not as a rule or a punishment, but as a person caught in the same snare as himself. "If I agree," he said carefully, "what happens next?" Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. "You stay. You speak before my uncle, who is chief of this small band. You say you will take me as your wife and live by our laws, while you remain. And if I leave someday?" She met his gaze steadily. "Then you leave as a man who kept his word." Something in her honesty struck him harder than fear ever could. "I never planned to marry anyone," Daniel admitted. "But I also never planned to die in a canyon." A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "The spirits have strange humor." After a long moment, he nodded. "All right, I'll do it." The relief that crossed her face was immediate and unmistakably human. In the days that followed, Daniel learned how close he'd come to death. Naya's people were wary but fair. The marriage was witnessed, simple, solemn. No celebration, no joy, just necessity. Yet as weeks passed, necessity softened into something else. Naya taught him the land, the hidden springs, the signs of weather, the language of silence. Daniel shared stories of distant towns and railroads, of a world she'd only heard rumors of. They were bound by law at first, then by trust, and finally by choice. One night, months later, as they sat beside the same stream where fate had turned his life upside down, Daniel said quietly, "If I'd known that mistake would lead me here, I might have walked into this canyon on purpose." Naya smiled, this time without fear. "Careful," she said. "The spirits might hear you." The first sign of trouble came with the dust. Daniel noticed it at dawn, thin lines rising on the far ridge. too steady to be wind, too purposeful to be animals. Riders, many of them. Naya stood beside him, her eyes narrowing as she studied the horizon. "They are not my people," she said quietly. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to his rifle. "Soldiers." She shook her head. "No, Mexican bounty hunters. They hunt Apache for silver." The camp stirred quickly. Children were pulled into lodges. Women gathered supplies. The men took positions along the rocks, faces hard, movements practiced. This small band had survived by avoiding fights, but avoidance was no longer possible. Daniel felt the weight of every eye on him. He was still an outsider. Some of the warriors tolerated him because of the marriage. Others saw him as a liability, a white man who brought danger with his presence. Daniel understood that if blood was spilled today, his place among them would be decided forever. Naya touched his arm. "If you wish to leave," she said softly, "you may try. No one would stop you." He looked at her. Really looked at her, the woman whose life was bound to his by a moment's accident. Now standing calm in the face of death, "I'm not leaving," he said. "Not today." Her lips pressed together, fighting emotion. "Then you stand with us." The bounty hunters appeared by mid-morning, 8 men, rough and confident, rifles slung casually, certain of their advantage. Their leader rode forward, a scar splitting his cheek. "We know you're hiding Apaches," he called in Spanish-accented English. "Hand over the women and children. We won't burn the camp." Silence answered him. Then Naya's uncle, the band's chief, stepped forward. His voice was steady. "These people are under my protection. Leave." The man laughed. "Protection from what? You have no soldiers, no law." Daniel stepped forward before he could stop himself. "They're not alone," he said. Every head turned. The bounty hunter squinted. "And who are you supposed to be?" Daniel met his gaze. "Her husband?" Murmurs rippled through the Apache warriors. The leader's smile faded. "You married an Apache woman?" "Yes." "Then you're no better than them." The shot came without warning. Daniel didn't know who fired first, only that chaos exploded. Rifles cracked. Horses screamed. Dust and smoke swallowed the canyon. Daniel fought not as a hero, but as a man who refused to run. He covered the retreat of the women and children, firing when necessary, dragging a wounded warrior to safety when he could. At one point, a bounty hunter rushed him with a knife. Daniel was knocked to the ground. Then the man fell forward, an arrow buried deep in his chest. Naya stood behind him, bow lowered, breath steady. "I told you," she said. "We protect our own." By sundown it was over. 2 Apaches were wounded. 1 bounty hunter lay dead. The others fled, taking their arrogance with them. Victory tasted bitter, but it was victory nonetheless. That night, the chief called Daniel to the fire. "You fought," the old man said. "You did not run." Daniel nodded. "I gave my word." The chief studied him for a long time. A man who keeps his word is no stranger here. He placed a hand over Daniel's shoulder. "From this day forward, you are not a guest. You are Apache by blood of choice." The camp echoed with approval. Later, as the fire burned low, Daniel and Naya sat alone beneath the stars. "You could have died," she said quietly. "So could you." She turned to him. "When you agreed to marry me, I thought it was fear that guided you." He shook his head. "It was at first." "And now?" He took her hand firm and warm in his. "Now it's because this is my home." For the first time, Naya allowed herself to lean against him. Far away, the desert wind carried the whispers of spirits, no longer mocking, but watching. The vow made by accident had become a bond forged by fire, and the world beyond the canyon was already moving toward them. The warning came 3 nights later. Daniel woke before dawn, not to sound, but to the absence of it. No insects, no wind. Even the fire had burned down too quietly. Naya was already sitting up, her hand closed around a knife. "They are close," she whispered. Before Daniel could ask who, a sharp cry cut through the camp, the unmistakable signal of a scout in danger. Then another, then silence. The chief was on his feet instantly. Orders were given in low, urgent voices. Warriors melted into the rocks like shadows, weapons ready. Daniel's stomach tightened. The bounty hunters hadn't learned their lesson. They had come back with help. By sunrise, the truth was clear. A large force, Mexican mercenaries, former soldiers, and hired guns, was moving through the valley. This wasn't a raid. It was a purge. They will not stop, the chief said grimly. They want land, silver, and Apache heads to prove their worth. Daniel clenched his jaw. Then we move. We don't fight them head-on. The old man studied him. You think like a survivor now. Naya looked between them. There is a place, she said. High cliffs. Narrow pass. Only one way through. A trap, but also a risk. By midday, the camp was gone, every trace erased. They traveled fast, children carried, the wounded supported. Daniel stayed at the rear, every snapped twig setting his nerves on fire. By nightfall, the cliffs rose before them like stone teeth. Too late, Daniel realized the silence ahead was wrong. A gunshot cracked. One of the scouts fell. They were waiting, Naya breathed. The mercenaries poured from hiding places, rifles flashing in the firelight. They had cut off the pass. The fight was brutal and desperate. Daniel fired until his rifle clicked empty, then used his revolver. Apache arrows darkened the sky, but numbers were against them. Then a voice rang out in English. Daniel Hart! Come out! The scar-faced bounty hunter leader rode forward, alive, smiling. Thought you could hide among savages? He sneered. You belong with your own kind. Daniel stepped forward before anyone could stop him. Naya grabbed his arm. No, he looked at her. If they want me, maybe this ends it. The bounty hunter laughed. Smart man. Come with us and we'll spare the rest. The chief's eyes hardened. Do not trust him. Daniel knew better, but he also knew the cost of refusal. Before he could speak, Naya moved. She stepped between Daniel and the guns. If you take him, she said coldly, you take me too. The bounty hunter raised a brow. I don't need the woman. She is my wife, Daniel said. You harm her, you answer to me. The man smirked. You won't live long enough to answer anything. And then, betrayal. A rifle fired from behind the Apache line. One of their own, young, fearful, bought with silver, had sold them out. The shot struck Daniel in the side. He fell. Time slowed. Naya screamed his name as the world tilted. The mercenaries surged forward, sensing victory. And then the cliffs answered. Apache warriors who had climbed unseen above the pass unleashed hell. Rocks crashed down. Arrows rained. The narrow canyon turned into a slaughterhouse. The bounty hunter's smile vanished as his horse reared and threw him. By the time the dust settled, the survivors were fleeing, broken, terrified. Daniel lay barely conscious, blood soaking the sand. Naya knelt beside him, hands shaking as she pressed cloth to his wound. Stay, she pleaded. Do not leave me. He forced his eyes open. Looks like I finally caused trouble worth dying for. Tears streaked her dust-stained face. You chose us. He smiled faintly. Best mistake I ever made. The medicine woman worked through the night. Fever came and went. Daniel drifted between worlds, hearing voices, his past calling him back, and Naya's voice anchoring him to the present. At dawn he woke, alive, weak but alive. The chief stood nearby. Blood was spilled, he said. Not just Apache blood, yours. Daniel struggled to sit. Does that mean something? It means, the old man replied, you no longer walk between worlds. You belong to this one. Weeks later, the band moved deeper into the mountains. Safer land, harder to reach. The traitor was gone, banished to face the desert alone. One evening, as the sun bled red across the sky, Daniel and Naya stood on a ridge overlooking their new home. You could still leave, Naya said quietly. When you are strong. Daniel took her hand. I already crossed the line, he said. I just didn't know it was the right one. She leaned into him, the weight of fear finally lifting. Below them, smoke rose from cooking fires. Children laughed. Life continued. What began as a law meant to punish had become a bond strong enough to survive guns, betrayal, and blood. And the desert, at last, had accepted him. Winter came early in the mountains. Snow dusted the high passes, and the air cut sharp enough to burn the lungs. Daniel's wound had healed into a hard, ugly scar, one that reminded him every morning that survival always demanded a price. The band had found a hidden valley, ringed by cliffs and pine, invisible unless you already knew the way. It was good land, safe land, but safety never lasted. A lone rider arrived one afternoon, under a white cloth tied to his rifle. A messenger, U.S. cavalry. The chief listened in silence as the man spoke of treaties, boundaries, enforced relocation, reservations, words that sounded peaceful but carried the weight of chains. "They say you must move south," the messenger finished. "Or the army will move you." Murmurs rippled through the camp, fear, anger, exhaustion. That night the fire burned low as the elders argued. Fight and die here, or move and slowly disappear elsewhere. Daniel sat apart, staring into the flames. Naya joined him. "You are quiet." "I know how this ends," he said. "For my people." She studied his face. "Then speak." At dawn, Daniel stood before the council. "I was born into the world that is coming for you," he said. "I know its hunger. It will not stop." The words were hard but honest. "There is another path," he continued. "The army wants proof of peace. A reason not to send soldiers." The chief's eyes narrowed. "What reason?" Daniel swallowed. "Me." Silence fell. "They will listen to a white man who chose to live as Apache," Daniel said. "I will go to them. I will swear that this band has done no wrong, that you seek only to live. And if they kill you," one elder asked. Daniel glanced at Naya. "Then my blood buys you time." Naya stood suddenly. "No." He reached for her hands. "I didn't cross worlds just to survive. I crossed to belong. This is what that means." Tears filled her eyes, but her voice did not break. "If you go, you carry my spirit with you." The chief rose. "If you walk this path," he said solemnly, "you walk it as Apache." He placed a beaded cord around Daniel's wrist. "Whatever happens, you are one of us." 2 days later, Daniel rode out alone. The cavalry camp was a sea of canvas and iron. Suspicion met him at every step, until he was brought before a young officer with tired eyes. "I am Daniel Hart," he said evenly, "and I stand as husband to an Apache woman and member of her band." Laughter rippled through the tent, then died as Daniel laid the beaded cord on the table. "I know your laws," he said, "and I know your wars. These people are not hostile. If you move against them, you will be fighting ghosts in the mountains. You will lose men and gain nothing." The officer studied him for a long time. "You're asking me to take your word over orders," he said. Daniel met his gaze. "I'm asking you to choose which lie costs more blood." 3 days passed, then 5. Back in the valley, Naya watched the passes every morning, fear eating at her patience. On the 7th day, riders appeared. She felt her heart stop, but they did not attack. The chief stepped forward as the officer dismounted, hat in hand. "We will mark this valley as neutral land," the officer announced. "For now, no forced removal, no pursuit." Relief broke through the camp like rain after drought. Daniel rode in last. Naya ran to him without shame, without restraint. He caught her as if afraid she might vanish. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you," he said. "I crossed the line already." That night there was celebration, not loud, not careless, but real. Food was shared. Stories were told. The fire burned high. Later, under the same stars that had watched their first meeting, Daniel and Naya stood together. "What will you be now?" she asked. He smiled, a man who made a mistake and stayed to live with it. She rested her forehead against his. The desert had tried to kill him. The law had tried to bind him. Fate had tried to test him. But in the end, he chose where he belonged, and the land accepted him. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories, and share it with someone who loves emotional and cinematic tales.